Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, March the 6th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm host the most Will Buchanan on the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we get started, guys, let you know that we do our best to try to be a news podcast, which means that we only do from the most reputable sources with award-winning journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, or whatever extreme left or extreme right people may go to. We simply don't do that. We give you just the facts, nothing but the facts. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language, but sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown tonight that might be too graphic for younger viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So, let's have some fun because, the next thing I'm going to play is might as well be I Told You So, but let's hear it from her because there's just no way I can just let this fly.
Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people.
So, out of that whole thing, I'm going to be honest, I didn't hear her, really saying we need to get behind Trump. She's like, I hope he gets the votes. It looks like he's going to get the nomination. I hope he can do this. Usually when you hear a conceding, it's like, well, I'm putting my support behind said person. And because right now we need to be one party, because that's the GOP in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, that Nikki Haley, the last standing Republican, because for all those that may not know, yesterday was Super Tuesday, which means that for the first time in America's history, a lot of states were voting for the primary nominations for Republican and Democratic positions. Which at this point, unless you've been in a rock or you pretty much guess what's going to happen, that we are going to get a rematch between, at this point, more than likely, Donald Trump winning the Republican nomination. And of course, the current president, President Biden, is going to win the Democratic nomination. Nikki Haley, which again, I don't mean to say I told you so, but there's no other way I could say this. At this point, it should be no surprise that she had no shot. She didn't. But neither did Tim Scott, America's blackest Uncle Tom. Neither did America's creepiest, America's creepiest, but probably crispiest, Christian Mike Pence. Definitely had no shot. Vivek Ramaswamy, really. Current dictator of Florida right now, Mr. Ron DeSantis, had no shot. We can keep going down the list here of folks that just wasn't going to make it. At the same time, what have we been saying this entire podcast from the last year? That at this point, Donald Trump did. The crazy part about this is the really crazy about politics, because the man did nothing. Donald Trump never attended a presidential debate. He went around grifting and fleecing his flock. He dodged court cases, lost a few, tried to peddle shoes at a sneaker con, in which some people did buy them. At the whole entire time, this man and his cult outwit a U.S. senator, a former vice president, a former U.S. ambassador, and your other grifter and Rashamsky and everyone else. Trump beat all of them by simply doing what he does best. He gets on Truth Social. He does his rallies. He basically spits nonsense, and the cult eats it up, even to the point where it's like, as a Republican, again, speaking from the Republican side of it, I don't understand why nobody wants to be conservative, except unless you're an old white person. Because unless you're an old white man, that's what the party caters to. But at the same time, these other politicians have the ability to stand out from Trump. But again, this kind of goes back to this whole theme of what have conservatives done this entire time this 118 Congress has been sworn in. What accomplishments could they actually have, aside from the numerous committees they did investigating Hunter Biden, trying to impeach President Biden, trying to shoot down every measure that Democrats try to push through to help the American people? Republicans have done nothing. And even more so, during their nominations, again, during the nominational race, what did Nikki Haley try to say? Oh, well, we're going to undo all the stuff that the Biden's Democrats are doing. Really? But what's your plan? Tim Scott, we are going to introduce the way education is need to be done because right now we have this issue with critical race theory. No, we don't. And of course, Mike Pence was quiet because Lord knows creepiest Christians don't really have ideas. They just repeat what they see in the Bible. But that's the problem with this current crop. And let me not forget Vivek Rashamsky, who was really spouting nonsense. But because he was animated, he was all of these things is the sole reason why he got buzz. But again, among these individuals, nobody could hold a candle to the con man because the con man believes he was done wrong. The con man believes he was persecuted. And I'll say this once and I'll say this again, and I apologize for the language, but Donald Trump is the wet dream of every conservative out there, short of going to the Playboy Mansion with a bottle of Viagra. That's just being honest. Donald Trump, a man who literally, if Miss Me with accountability was a person, it was him. And yes, he has taken some L's, some court cases that haven't went in his favor. Especially with his New York case from the AG Miss Letitia herself, which, by the way, she is counting down the days to when she can sit there and take Trump Tower because Trump, for all his talk about being a rich billionaire, doesn't have $400 million he can cough up. He's too busy begging Elon Musk for that right now. But at this point, he will do all he can to push his court cases back. Because if he does get nominated, because again, I don't understand this. I will never understand this because we keep saying nobody's above the law, including the president. Okay, cool. So can Donald Trump, if he does win the Republican nomination, can he still hold court? Can he still be held at trial? I believe so. But watch they try to push the court cases back. That only helps out Trump. Trump's been trying to do it for the longest time. He's been trying to get his court cases pushed back. He's trying to get rulings that rule against him to be repealed or get a new trial. He's doing everything that he can. Why? Because he's a man that's trying to avoid jail time at its finest. But only in America can a guy like Trump somehow, some way, even with all the evidence against him, yet this man is still walking around unscathed. But hey, he actually might get the nomination again, like we called it. Which, again, to the GOP, you guys can't say spit. You have nothing to go off of. You're too busy pointing out what the other side is doing, and you've yet to provide a plan to help America. Yes, I truly do wonder if the nominations for getting Trump got him on a landslide. I can only imagine when the midterms come up, when the House and Senate are going to be up in the next year or so, and Republicans still have no record to stand on. So you'll go with the fear mongering. You'll go with the whole thing of Democrats will overspend. We're going to pass this debt to our grandchildren and this, that, and the other. But I'll tell you one thing. You have a conservative leaning Supreme Court. And that right there is dangerous. Why? Because again, with this other story that I'm about to show you guys, that the Supreme Court decided to basically overturn the Colorado State Supreme Court on removing Trump from the ballot, rejecting the 14th Amendment. Now, for all those that don't know what happened, let me give you a recap. The state of Colorado decided to basically do what every state should have done by now, is basically hold Donald Trump in contempt of the violation of the 14th Amendment, which again, if you cause an insurrection, you cannot run for office. And I could go down the list of January 6th. I can go down the list of the fact that he was at a rally right beforehand to where they were counting electoral votes. And he's talking about, we're going to go down here. We're going to stop the steal. You had Josh Hawley trying to put a fist up in solidarity, but he ran when the mob showed up. You had Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was trying to sit there and say that she wasn't a part of the mob, but she is the mob because she's that dull-headed. You had every Republican jumping on the coattails of Trump because Trump brings idiotic votes. And even more so, obviously violated the 14th Amendment. Hence why the state of Colorado sat there and said, no, you violated the 14th Amendment. Therefore, we disqualify you from being on the ballot, which means that Colorado's electoral votes could not go to Trump because he's not on the ballot. So again, Trump whined and complained. But here's the thing that's scary about this, that Trump whined and complained and said that his case should be heard by the Supreme Court. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know how many cases people wish they get to the Supreme Court to get to the highest court in the land, in our land? And yet he complains and said he wants his case tried by the Supreme Court because he's got a home court. He's got a home court advantage up there because the actual entire panel is overly conservative leaning, which means that there are more conservative judges on that panel than there are liberal progressive ones. And at the same time, here's what's scary about it. And again, this is why I say the dangers of a conservative leaning Supreme Court. The dangers of it is that they can turn around and overrule a previous ruling. And what the Supreme Court did, they sat there and said that Colorado as a state does not have the ability to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, citing the 14th Amendment. Here's the conundrum I have with this. Because the GOP, the party of small government, the party of states' rights, the party that says if the state does it, then the government should not interfere. The federal government should not interfere. Okay. Colorado just sat there and said, as a state, we do not want Donald Trump on our ballot. We are exercising our states' rights. I did not see one conservative person sit there and defend Colorado's decision. We know what they did do. They basically decided to attack Colorado. Oh, how dare they remove our former president over because he wasn't an insurrectionist. He wasn't a traitor. So that just goes to show you the party that always talks about small government and states' rights and all this mess is all bullshit. It's what it is. So at the same time, I did not expect any GOP person to speak up in defense of Colorado. But at the same time, it's scary how that case got heard by the Supreme Court. At the same time, the Supreme Court sat there and said, no, the state can't do that. So who can? Because that's the Constitution. Technically, all states follow the Constitution. Hence why with the United States of America, the Constitution is kind of our go-to book on rulings and regulations and how things are handled. If the state is saying that we can't do that, then who can? Congress? Imagine the fact that if they say Congress, which again is a weak sauce argument, which means that a bill would have to be submitted to the House or the Senate, voted on majority, and then somehow signs the president's desk for Colorado to be empowered. I'm sorry, that's weak ass sauce. And at the same time, benefits Trump. Trump is back on the ballot in Colorado, which means that he is now eligible for those electoral count votes. Does anybody else see a problem with this here? That it's amazing that Trump can say something and it gets done, and it's scary. Oh, I want my case heard by the Supreme Court. It's being heard by the Supreme Court. His case on presidential immunity as we speak is being about to be heard by the Supreme Court. And again, that is a scary thought that a conservative-leaning Supreme Court could do that. Now, not a lot of people are going to point this out, but will all 9 judges agree to this? So what does that say about the liberals and progressives? I have to ask the question, how do they if that I have to ask this question again, because if a state cannot exercise the 14th Amendment, then who? Because of what's the whole point about the 14th Amendment in the Constitution if it's not being exercised and enforced by what body, if not the state? But I digress. It's going to be one of those things that we'll get an answer for. But if I was interviewing a Supreme Court justice, I'd ask everybody that question, not just the conservatives. But moving right along, guys, I want to cover this story as well because for all those that that do not know this story, I just want to go ahead and repeat this. Isaac Goodloe. For all those that don't know, Isaac Goodloe was a man that lived in Illinois that was literally shot and killed by police in his bedroom. Because again, wrong house, wrong information. Still would have been hot and heavy. And unfortunately, Mr. Goodloe died from his injuries. His family is suing because of the body cam footage. So, because of the body cam footage, which showed multiple things, and trust me, it's out there for the world to see. But after being shot, fatally wounded, and the fact that keep in mind, this was just last month. Last month this occurred, and yet there's been no arrest. There's been nothing of the sort. So what does the family decide to do? The family has decided to sue. The family decided to open lawsuit. And it's likely as well, because again, this happened last month. It happened on February 3rd, and yet there's no information that's been put out. The officers are still suspended with pay on administrative. The officers are on administrative leave, as they call it, which is basically with pay. But at the same time, yes, if I'm the family, it's like, why are these officers not being held to court? Why are these officers not being identified? Again, I keep pointing this out whenever it comes to law enforcement. They seem to have more protection than the people they are supposed to be sworn to protect and serve. But I digress. We'll still follow that story as it comes up. Another story, though, which again, I find this interesting because we covered this sometime last year, where again, this guy who decided that because a woman with friends were in the driveway, they were apparently going the wrong way, so they pulled in this person's driveway to back out and go out. The individual that you see there on the right, the jumpsuit, actually shot at the car and killed the woman. Well, it's been found out that he has now been sentenced 25 years to life. And rightly so, because you basically exercise a firearm. For no reason. Even the judge says, quote unquote, it's obvious to me that you feel justified. You don't take any responsibility for the outcome of your actions. You just don't get it. So yes, he acted recklessly. And as a person who owns firearms, look, I get the fact that people say, well, you know who's going to pull up in your driveway. You don't know if they're going to try to do something. Okay, granted. But if they're backing out and going away from your home, they're not a threat. You just want a reason to shoot somebody. So I don't feel bad for that guy at all. 25 years to life. He'll never, the only way he's getting out is in a pine box. I don't really feel bad about that because again, you have folks, it kind of goes back to the whole thing about gun ownership and the people that own them. Like there are trigger happy ones and there are paranoid ones. And again, there's the whole reason why we're talking about gun reform and the mental psyche of America, because that's not the only time a person has exercised the use of their gun in a reckless manner. But I guarantee you won't be the last until something is done. But hey, 25 years to life, get used to prison food. Move right along, guys. I want to cover the story as well because, again, guys, we talked about the fact of what happens when you gut a piece of affirmative action. And I'll keep pointing this out. Asian students decided to sue Harvard, saying that Harvard discriminated against them because of their race, and in turn caused the Supreme Court to gut a piece of affirmative action that deals with college entry exam. That deals with college entries. Now, for a lot of people sitting there saying, well, that's just college entry. How does that affect me? You gutted a part of affirmative action that basically has to guarantee that diversity and inclusion happens everywhere. And that because you remove that, companies do not fear being sued anymore. So therefore, what happens? They can easily get rid of positions. Don't believe me? Ask Florida.
University of Florida eliminating all diversity, equity, and inclusion positions over new state rules. The college getting rid of more than a dozen full-time jobs, including its chief diversity officer, and canceling all DEI-funded contracts with vendors. The university now led by former Republican Senator Ben Sasse after the state legislature passed a law last year banning funding for DEI programs. Now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis celebrating this move. He posted on social media, you see right there, quote, DEI is toxic and has no place in our public universities. 8 other states, including Florida, have passed legislation aimed at dismantling diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. So I want to bring back our panel here, Mike, John, Christina, and LZ. And John, let's jump right into it here. Look, there were concerns from some outspoken parents that worried that DEI initiatives overstep and that they break trust with parents. And the critics of the program said it essentially pushes left-wing ideologies, with worries that some students might be left out to then boost representation of other groups. So, John, what is your take on that?
Well, my take is that this is too much too fast. If there are concerns with DEI programs in universities and schools, address those concerns, but don't eliminate them, because think about what's at the core of what DEI is. DEI is just trying to make sure that everyone is included and everyone is being treated fairly. If they think someone's being treated unfairly, then you can address that. But let's not forget that a lot of people are being treated unfairly based on sexual orientation or the race for decades in this country, and they're trying to fix that. So let's get it right instead of just eliminating a program altogether.
And LZ, look, this state ban that cuts funds for DEI programs also does the same for any political or social activism in the public college system. Is this leading down a road that could inspire fear in academics?
Well, there's always been fear in academics, even more so now today. I know certainly, on campus, as where I'm teaching, we've been talking a lot about the attacks that's been happening against diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it's based on a false premise that we're now a colorblind society, which we know we are not. There's no socioeconomic data point that you can point to suggest that we're a colorblind society, but that's the premise in which this elimination of DEI is based upon. And so that's been a concern in terms of just representation in terms of student bodies, but also professors and administrators. And so, yes, there's a lot of fear out there right now, Kana.
And Christina, to you, Democrats are saying that this effort is out of touch, an attempt to tackle something that isn't a problem. But Christina, Florida argues that using public funds for these kinds of programs is an issue, and that this is a political issue. Do you see this, I guess, more as a political issue or a policy issue here when you break it down?
This is a political issue for Republicans to be able to win and hold office at the expense of our children's ability to learn. Look, what these legislators refuse to acknowledge is first that we are one of the most diverse nations on the planet and that our diversity is our strength. The second thing they refuse to acknowledge is the reason why these departments were created in the first place, to give students the tools to address long-term inequalities, which makes our country and our universities better and stronger. Lastly, they act like teaching students being able to learn the stories of Black Americans, Latino Americans. They say, we don't want to learn their history. That's not their history. That's our history as a country. And so when we deny and rob students the ability to learn about their own history, we deny them the ability to learn about our entire history as a country. And that's just a huge, huge step back.
Well, Mike, considerations like this are not just happening, though, in Florida. The Washington Post recently noted that Zoom got rid of its DEI team in a broader layoff there. Major corporations like Meta, Lyft, DoorDash, X, they've cut their DEI teams by some 50% or even more. What do you think that signals?
Yeah, we're seeing a trend right now, not just in academic, but in corporate America. It's because of this long-standing notion that we start thinking about like diversity and inclusion, it means unqualified. And that's just the biggest misnomer and myth that is out there. But because of the polarization of society, that narrative has been allowed to stand. In relationship to colleges, and particularly think of the University of Florida, what people are not recognizing is that the amount of administrators whose positions were terminated. The part that troubles me is that we become more of a polarized society, and John alluded to this about sexual orientation and race, but also too, religion discourse is really igniting on college campuses. We need these trained professionals on campus to help moderate such sensitive and polarizing discourse who are adequately trained in their field. When you break your leg or you get a sprained ankle, you go to the doctor who could then provide healing and treatment plans. This is when you have the most polarized society that we have. You need trained professionals professionals that can help us moderate and really prepare the next future of thought leaders, corporate leaders. College universities are the training ground for that. So why wouldn't you want them to have trained professionals to help lead the next corporation and thought leaders of tomorrow?
All right.
So again, it amazes me that, when you remove diversity and inclusion, that people want to sit there and say, oh, well, it's indoctrination, or we're just putting some other kids while we're putting kids. And it's like, it's amazing they don't want to say it. That was the part that killed me. It's like, you don't want to sit there and say, well, we don't want kids of color to be considered, to be given priority over kids who are not. Keep in mind, they're being very selective when they say that. Oh, with DEI, because they're trying to treat DEI the same way they're trying to treat critical race theory. And it's amazing that we've had affirmative action for so long, and it's been needed. Because what happens when you remove diversity inclusion from affirmative action? Well, you get this. You get articles like this really quickly. Black women struggle to find their way in a job world while diversity is under attack. This is why I keep saying affirmative action was needed. Affirmative action was needed because it forces companies to look at people of color. It forces companies to look at us and see about, to give us a fair shot. It wasn't the fact of putting people of color over those who are not. It's a fact of evening out the playing field. That, for example, you don't want to be seen as racist if your entire board of directors looks like a white wall and you have one person. And again, HR companies around the block have always sat there and said, well, we have a quota. They'll never say it, but it's true. We do have a quota that for every five or six napkins, you have to have at least 3 or 4 black folks, or 1 black person, 2 other people of color, because, more than 1 black person kind of freak out. But whatever quota formula they have, it's good enough to where it flies on the radar, to where it's like, we can say we're diversified because we have more than white people here. And that's the truth. And again, affirmative action for what it was did work. The fact that, again, for Asian students got part of affirmative action gutted is the reason why a lot of companies now can stare and say, oh, so we can go ahead and cut this and there's no blowback on us? Cool. Y'all can go. Their whole thing is, the whole budget regarding ethnicity positions and then diversity inclusion positions, we can let those go and send that money somewhere else or give it back to ourselves and not worry about getting sued. Cool. And that's how they look at it. That's why when that part of affirmative action got gutted, you saw how many companies immediately fire their DEI positions. Now, I will say this, being that it's University of Florida or any university that has DEI positions removed, those athletes that are bringing the money or bringing the boosters to those colleges, if I was them, I would go ahead and hit the transfer portal. Why? Because if you believe in not hiring a person of color in a position to where they can be influential and actually help me as a black college student, then I'm taking my athletics somewhere else. And again, I'm all for that, as it should be done. But the problem is, the more that we remove these diversity inclusion positions, the worse it's going to be, because the job market is going to look very drastic, because you're going to have a lot of qualified people of color who can do the job. But you have these companies out here who are insulated and say, well, we don't need to hire you and you can't sue us for it, which again, make it make sense. Moving along, the Biden administration has finally said, we're going to do something with those junk fees. Oh, good. So you're going to finally get away. You're finally going to have banks get rid of the overdraft fees. You're going to finally give banks, the ability not to charge us for money that we don't have. Sort of. We're going to credit cards first.
Meanwhile, it's cracking down on credit card fees. A new rule will go into effect mid-May, limiting how much credit card companies can charge for late payments. Business reporter Alexis Christoforous has more on that. Alexis, what's this new policy and how does it compare to the current average late fee?
So the Biden administration, we know, has sort of made cracking down on these junk fees a cornerstone of his economic agenda. And if you've ever been late with a credit card payment, you know those fees can be really burdensome and severe. Depending on the credit card company or the bank, they could be over $40 a month. The average is at about $32. That's still pretty hefty. And so this new rule under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau would cap those late late fees at $8. And that should be a big savings. They're saying a $10 billion savings for U.S. consumers. Currently, 45 million people thereabouts are late with their credit card payments every month. So this could be a real savings for them.
So how does the rule affect Americans with credit card debt?
So this rule is coming at a time when credit card debt, we know, is at an all-time high. The Federal Reserve telling us over $1 trillion in outstanding credit card debt. The average family now has about $6,000 in credit card debt. And with interest rates on those credit cards above 20%, it's really hard to get that debt down, especially when now we're seeing late fees or late payments starting to rise because more people are having a tough time making ends meet, putting things like essentials, food on their credit cards every month.
How are banks and credit card companies responding to this?
No surprise to find they are against this rule. These industry groups are coming out and saying it's going to hurt consumers more than help them. They say if they lose that revenue stream or it's greatly reduced from those late fees, they're going to be forced to raise credit card interest rates on everyone. Look, this new rule comes out 2 days before President Biden's State of the Union address. In an election year, there is a lot at stake here. And so far, Biden's crackdown on these junk fees don't seem to be tracking with Americans. You know, the latest poll shows Americans only approve, 34% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's handling of the economy. So he knows there's a lot at stake.
Yeah, because he's not going after the fees that make sense. He's not going after the multiple fees that states do charge. He's not going after banks and the ridiculous overdraft fees that they do charge. And they think there, because again, overdraft fees just by itself. Because again, banks will sit there and say, "Oh, you don't have this money in your account. We're going to charge you for it." How do you charge me for money that I don't have? And banks have made billions. Last year, I'm pretty sure the banks have made $8 billion off overdraft fees. And again, those are the junk fees that people will be excited for. Those are junk fees. Those type of junk fees are what they're hoping the Biden administration takes care of. Don't get me wrong about credit cards. Credit card late fees can be a mother, but it's more about what the banks are doing, because credit cards, much like the banks, they're only there to please the profit share, to please their profits, to please their shareholders. Because the more profit they bring their shareholders, the better it is for them. And I'm not knocking the fact that Biden is trying to do something, but I keep coming back to this whole thing that Biden is not doing enough. I'm just being completely honest. Biden is not doing more than enough. He's doing just enough to sit there and say, this is what we're attacking, but not enough to where it's like, okay, I get it. We need to hit this. Where now, yes, you're attacking junk fees. Junk fees are good. But at the same time, hit them where it hurts. We would like the banks to be held accountable, sir. And then we'll see what happens from there. And also, guys, moving right along, because we did cover this as well, about Boeing and the passenger plane, about that Boeing 9X aircraft where the door had blown off and pretty much the passengers there kind of had a bit of a scare because that happened on takeoff. Well, knew that was happening. Passengers are suing Boeing for $1 billion over that mid-air door panel for that mid-door panel blowout that happened on that Boeing plane. At the same time, I don't blame them because they should be suing. They come to find out the plane wasn't inspected. That crucial bolts that actually hold the crucial bolts that actually hold the door in were actually not there. And then on several other MAX 9 planes, that bolts were either missing or loose, which again caused the entire group to be shuttled. Which now, again, those people that are on that plane are simply going, you know what? Sue them as you should. You jeopardize because of the fact of negligence, which again it is negligence, that those passengers could have lost their lives. I mean, there were some slight damages on the plane, but again, could have been way worse if they were at 36,000 feet. But Boeing itself has sat there and said, you know, the CEO has taken accountability. But again, if you've seen what Boeing has done lately, they might be paying this one out too. Hey, Osman, what'd you say? Facts. All the free trials you don't intend on keeping. Yeah. I mean, junk fees. It's one of those things to where something needs to happen. But again, we will see. Moving right along, guys. Biden is kind of being ticked off in Israel right now. Has sat there and told Israel's chief security that we want to have a ceasefire with Gaza. Which again, Netanyahu, which somehow this welfare queen seems to keep his power in Israel, is not going to do a ceasefire. Now, I have been saying this the entire time. about the war that's happening between Israel and Hamas, and Gaza and Palestine are in the middle. Again, do your research, do your history. But as I said before, as you do your history on this thing, guys, you find out that the people that you think are responsible are really not. And the bully is the one that we're kind of financing right now. So if I was Biden trying to tell Netanyahu to do a ceasefire, it's simple. Pull the plug. Stop, because I always say this. It's amazing that conservatives always talk about welfare queens when Israel is the biggest welfare queen to the United States. They get $1 billion in foreign aid every year. And Netanyahu seems to be hell-bent on fighting Gaza, even though it looks more like an occupation than a war. But again, I digress. Moving right along all this way, guys, back to politics for a second, because Joe Manchin has said that he is not running for office. Thank you, God, because Lord knows we don't need another indecisive Democrat trying to play Republican. But his partner in crime, however, Kirsten Sinema, has also said that after this one, she's done. Nobody's going to miss her.
We have some breaking news. Independent Senator Kirsten Sinema of Arizona says that she is not running for re-election. She says she's going to be leaving the Senate at the end of the year. Let's get straight now to CNN Chief Congressional Correspondent Manu Raju on Capitol Hill. Manu, get us up to speed here.
Yeah, this is very significant. Of course, Kirsten Sinema has been a key player in the Senate for several years now, being the center of a number of negotiations here in the Senate, someone who has actually gotten a lot of pushback, anger from the left flank of her party, ultimately drove her from the Democratic Party, became an independent senator, caucusing with the Democrats. But there's been a key question about the Senate race this year, the Senate map, about what Kirsten Sinema would do in this critical swing seat of Arizona. She just announced she is going to step aside, will not run for re-election in November, which will change the dynamics in that very critical Senate race in Arizona. She just put out a lengthy statement explaining her decision to step aside. She talked about the need to work together, how the need for civility and for compromise. She said that she laments the facts, in her words, compromise is a dirty road. She said we have arrived at a crossroad and we choose anger and division. And ultimately she says that it's time for her to step aside. This will change how this Senate race could eventually turn out. If she were to run, it would be uncertain whether she would pull support from the Democratic side or the Republican side. There's a Republican candidate who is running in that race, Carrie Lake, the former gubernatorial candidate. There's a Democratic candidate, also Ruben Gallego. He's a Democratic candidate as well. I just talked to Steve Daines, who's the chairman of the Senate GOP campaign committee. He told me that he believes that Sinema's decision to step aside will ultimately boost Carrie Lake's chance in this pivotal race. But there's not only this have an impact on the map here, Brianna, but also on the Senate as well. Several of these deal maker types, Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, Mitt Romney, all saying that they will not run for re-election. That will ultimately change the makeup of the Senate, whether they can cut deals and have implications too.
So yes, Kirsten Sinema has sat there and said, well, I think we should step down and let new people take over. Well, here's the problem with this. Kirsten Sinema, a woman who had no problem saying no to a progressive standpoint, because much like Manchin, she was a moderate Democrat. That's Republican light. She voted against Joe Biden's more progressive measures, and because of the time they needed because of the time of the measurement they were using in Congress to get things past the Senate, which was a slim majority, they needed all Democratic senators on board. It was Sinema and Manchin that was a thorn in Biden's side for a lot of his plans and policies never went through. And again, this is the thing I want to point out, that when politicians get on, whether they run for whether in the House, whether in the Senate, whether in the executive office, my thing is what your performance is how you should be paid. I don't think you should be given the standard 174 to 180 salary of a year, because Kirsten Sinema did nothing. Again, I hate to say this, because even though on the Democratic side, they do have some wins, but what has Kirsten Sinema did to actually sit there and say that she's done a wonderful job as a senator? Because keep in mind, the Build Back Better America plan, instead of her reviewing it, she took it back to her Chamber of Commerce back in Arizona and sat there and said, hey, is this a good idea? So you just said, forget that and kick the can down the road. That was smart. At the same time, she voted down measures on women. She's voted down measures on National Voting Day. She's voted down measures on increasing the minimum wage. She's voted down measures on infrastructure rebuilding. At the same time, she's now retiring and saying that other people need to step in. Well, I'm glad, because I don't think she would have made it past the midterms. I am just saying. But I'm sorry, Senator Kristen Sinema. Much like Joe Manchin, you will not be missed. That's all I'm saying. But speaking of things that should be missed, thinking of things, that was a terrible segue. Thinking of things that should not be missed, however, Tennessee, my home state, progressively backwards. Guys, if you want to see what happens when a conservative supermajority takes over a state, look no freaking further. And I mean, yes, you got Texas, you got Florida, but only in Tennessee, specifically the capital of Nashville, where these Tennessee state lawmakers, I kid you not, and again, I apologize for this who may trigger, but they are actually about to set up a bill that would ban the LGBTQ pride flag, the LGBTQ plus pride flag in schools. Now, here's the crazy part. The measure is called HB 1605. It's called the Heritage Protection Act, which again, this is what they're trying to use. But the HB 605 is an amendment to the Heritage Protection Act, which back in 2013 and 3, it sits there and says, it states no state, quote unquote, no state states no memorial regarding a no memorial regarding a historic conflict, historic entity, historic event that is or is located on public property may be removed, renamed, relocated, altered, rededicated, or otherwise distributed or altered. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that basically means is that the amendment that they're putting in, HB 1605, says that which flags can be displayed in school. Now, that bill determines several different types of flags can be displayed, including the U.S. flag, the official Tennessee state flag, which is the stat flag with 3 stars, and any flag that's protected by the Tennessee Heritage Protection Act. Now, again, you're probably wondering where I'm going with this. Well, there's a certain flag about 2 years ago that, because there were a lot of people, confused individuals in the South, that sat there and said that the Confederate flag is heritage, which, again, your heritage is racism and slavery next to a battle flag. Now, here's the crazy part. That flag is now protected. That flag is protected under the Heritage Protection Act here in Tennessee. You know what isn't protected under the Heritage Protection Act in Tennessee, and why that measure of 1605 is important? Because the pride flag would not fall into that, and therefore be removed from schools. Certain schools in Tennessee do carry the pride flag. Some do not. And because this was submitted by Gino Bulso, again, an idiot, a Republican idiot here in Tennessee, says that he submitted this back in November after receiving complaints from parents in his district about the pride flag and after contentious debates on whether the flag should be allowed in classrooms, which again erupted into a local school board meeting. Are you, of all the things, and that's the thing that kills me, and yes, I know I'm from Tennessee. It's like there's no other way I can get past this. But you're gonna sit there and tell me that the reason why we're dealing with this as a measure is because parents are uneasy about a pride flag in a kid's school. Well, we just think that it's gonna lead to indoctrination and it's gonna turn them gay. And I'm like, here's my thing. It's like, you know what it is? And I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. It reminds me of people that look at other people and try to figure out they're gay. Like if they do a certain ism or they try to do a certain thing, the first thing they're thinking of is that person gay? They get obsessed with it. They get obsessed with whether or not that person is gay. Those are the same people that I believe are those same ones that are trying to get the pride flag removed. Because it's like, it's a flag. It's a representation of one's ethnics, of one's heritage. If your heritage is the fact that you carry the pride flag, fly it. In the same sense that you would fly the American flag. In the same sense you would fly your state flag. In the same sense where a bunch of confused hillbillies, rednecks, and those that still want to, still chew for the losing side we'll stick with the Confederate flag. But the fact of the matter is, it is amazing in Tennessee that they're basically using this to sit there and say, we're going to protect our Confederate flag, but we're going to legally get rid of the pride flag. Way to go, Tennessee, to let people know that, no, you're not bigots. It's the fact that you're just heavily confused. But again, that is a measure with Tennessee lawmakers. It hasn't been voted on yet, but we will follow that story as it goes along. But this other story, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's got to be said because every year, Dr. Michelle Obama, because she has her doctorate. First of all, first lady above all stars. A first lady who acted more like a Secretary of State than the first lady, and that's how it tells you how much she got done. But every year, this story is brought up, and I just sit there and shake my head every time I see it, where you literally see that the Michelle Obama from the office of Michelle Obama says that she will not be running for president in 2024. Again, I cannot tell you guys enough. This isn't the first time this story has came up. But what's crazy about this is, right, Michelle Obama, to me, a woman who literally for 8 years dealt with a whole lot of shit from a whole lot of ignorant people, tried to call her a man, talked about her daughters, said every which way about her as much as humanly possible. This woman carried with grace. This woman carried with elegance. At the same time, you can't forget the fact that when she says, when they go low, we go high. That is her to a T. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I hope that, that she would run for office? Yes. But in my opinion, the woman has done enough. Leave her alone. She had to deal with America for 8 years. At this point, I am beyond convinced she just needs to just relax, live your life. You don't need to save the world again. You already did it once with your husband. Because again, keep in mind, you can serve as president. Like I said, president is just 2 consecutive terms. You got to sit one out and you come back. But I wouldn't ask Barack Obama to come back. Although Supreme Court could definitely use him right now. But it is amazing to me that whenever the election cycle comes up, a Michelle Obama story pops up. It's like, she doesn't want to run. What if she does? That's my thing. What if she says, you know what? Yeah, I'll run. I'll run for office. Democrats will be behind her. Why? Because she'll win by a landslide. At the same time, who do you have on the Republican side? Oh, right, because they don't want a woman representing them that they can't control. Ask Nikki Haley. So yes, I hate to say it, guys, but no, she's not running, and that's completely fine. This woman has lived her life, and therefore she should be allowed to live her life in peace, along with her husband and her children. Because again, that was the first family in a long time that did not have a scandal for 8 years. I, for one, am freaking grateful. The last story I got, guys, before we get to our feel-good news segment is basically about CVS and Walgreens. They will start dispensing the abortion pill, and forgive me if I mispronounce this, mifepristone. Either way, the abortion pill will be available at CVS and Walgreens because they now receive certification to dispense it following a rule with the FDA. Keep in mind, abortion is still a hot topic in the country, which I'm surprised it is, considering the fact that, again, a woman's body is her choice. What is so hard to fucking figure out about that? Please excuse my language. But because of the fact of Roe versus Wade being overturned, because of the fact that many states have put abortion laws into place at the time of the rule change happening, that again, women have had to figure out how to either make very life-threatening decisions, travel to places to where abortions are performed, or simply put, more drastic measures. Now, again, Biden and the FDA has said that you can receive the abortion pill by mail or from your local pharmacy, which in this case, they're going ahead moving forward with. Because, again, women should be allowed to do whatever they want with their bodies without judgment or without infringement. Because here's my thing. A woman should basically have the same protection as the Second Amendment rights. The rights that all gun nuts always love to say, we are the right to infringe, the right to own arms shall not be infringed upon. And guess what, gun nuts? It never was. In the same sense, I wish a woman's body could be treated like gun rights. A woman's body is hers and hers alone. No group of old white men should be able to tell a woman what she can do or make her feel like she's nothing more than a broodmare. Again, how simple it would be. But we'll follow that story as it goes along, guys, because trust and believe those of the pro-life/pro-birth community hate abortion, but at the same time, I think they hate that people just do decisions that are different from them and they just cannot accept it. More than likely. But we're going to go ahead and get to our feel-good story because usually, guys, on How the Frack We Got Here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes make use faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday, hump day. Tomorrow is Friday, which is Thursday. We will leave you guys out on a good note. And yes, Black History Month, as far as the U.S. knows, is over. But for Black people, we are Black 365. And again, I want to share the milestone of a company, of a Black movie company that has been around for more than a century.
Having marked Black History Month, the family business made in America, and it turns out not long after the Civil War. Tonight, we round out Black History Month with a Made in America story we can all celebrate. The oldest continuously Black-owned business in the country. In Columbus, Ohio, E.E. Ward Moving and Storage, 143 years old. Founder John T. Ward starting the company in 1881, just 20 years after the Civil War. Their Ohio family farm was a stop on the Underground Railroad. John and his son William using horse and buggy to help fugitive slaves escape north to freedom. During the Civil War, using their transport skills to haul supplies for the Union Army. After the war, founding their moving company, eventually named after the founder's grandson, Edgar Earl. Over the many decades, their company growing, the 1940s, the 50s, the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. Headquartered in Columbus, expanding to Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina. 45 trucks, more than 75 employees. And right here tonight.
Hi, David.
Raleigh Head, on the job 35 years.
I'm a mover and a packer.
Hi, David.
Lindsay, 17 years.
I'm very proud of the 143-year-old history that dates back to the Underground Railroad.
Hi, David.
Jerome Davis with his moving truck.
I've been with E.E. Ward for 35 years. Driver, mover. I'm glad to be part of this legacy.
Hi, David.
And new hire tonight, Najib.
I feel very fortunate to be part of such a company with rich history.
Hi, David.
Brian Brooks, the current president and co-owner, along with his wife, Dominique, celebrating the legacy of this company. Eldon Earl Ward was Brian's godfather.
In this month of Black History, it's something definitely special to celebrate.
They say they're proud to continue this tradition.
John T. Ward and his son William S. Ward started the company based to service customers at a high level of excellence. Really proud that we have continued that. We are really proud of our team and strive to continue to service our customers as best as we can.
E.E. Ward Moving.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, 143 years. This is why I keep on saying, guys, that I'm the only one. Representation matters above all else, especially in that case, because we all want something. We all want something that outlives us all. At the same time, we want something to be proud of as Black people. And yes, I will be very, very specific. We all want something as Black people that we can have that outlives us and be proud of it. And doggone it, E.E. Ward definitely has that. But that's going to do it for this podcast, guys. I do thank you all for watching, for liking, for letting people know about it. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plug before we get out of here as usual. Shout out to Vaughn and Big VZA who did handle the music and things of that nature. Definitely check him out on his music page for any music that you might need for songs, television shows, podcasts, things of that nature. Definitely check him out. Big VZA on all social media. Also, shout out to Blurred Station. I cannot stress this enough, guys. We just got through talking about things that are Black owned, and Blurred Station is definitely that. It is definitely for people of color and for Black people because we're used to Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and, adding or removing content. Prices are going up and down. And again, it's not us. We actually, for all those that don't know, every basis of media television was actually built off Black creators, Black shows, things of that nature. Look it up. We basically influenced all major networks. But yet at the same time, once those networks got what they needed from us, they moved on. Hence why we need something like Blurred Station, where it's basically for us, by us to enjoy. Again, guys, it is basically a Netflix, except the fact is that the prices aren't going to go up. And at the same time, the content's not going to disappear. They have shows, they have television shows, they have movies, they have anime productions. They are adding to it on a daily basis. if you'll do me a favor, definitely go to Join Now. And once you do go to Join Now, you definitely want to select Blurred's Eye View Affinity membership. You can select anybody here, including myself, Black Spartan. We definitely feel that we'll appreciate that. And of course, at Blurred Station is $10.99 a month. $10.99 a month. You can't beat that with a stick, especially with the fact of what Hulu and Amazon and all these other streaming services are charging. $10.99 a month is a steal. Now, the beauty about the Affinity membership is that 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, you yourself will be able to own a piece of Blur Station. Now, I don't know how to tell you this. If you ever want to own a piece of a conglomerate media like Apple TV or Hulu or Netflix or any of the ones out there, not realize you got to pay an assload amount of money just for 1 or 2 shares through E-Trade, again, paying 36 months of $10.99 seems a hell of a lot easier. At the same time, it's for the culture. It's what we've always wanted to have, a spot in Blur Station. Of course, if you are a content creator and you want to see about how you can actually join Blur Station, again, you'll need to actually join Blur Station, and then you'll be able to reach in contact to the people behind the curtain and be able to get in touch. Because again, at Blur Station, the content you make is yours. You just help out. You just basically just give a little bit of a distribution up. And I don't know about you, a hell of a lot better than going to Tubi, because Tubi made $100 million off Black creators last year. Why not do the same for Blur Station? Now, as far as me, guys, you can definitely find me Black_Spartan615 on the socials. I do reviews on mostly everything. The link at the bottom, I'll just make that a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link into your browser, it'll take you to my link tree. That's the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of our podcasts. How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit Podcast, of course, Y'all for this podcast. All these podcasts can be found on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitch, and on YouTube by their names. Again, How the Frack We Got Here. Get Bit Podcast and the Offense Podcast. Definitely like, definitely share, subscribe, turn your notifications, because guys, I hate to sound like PBS, but it's true. We cannot do this without you. The whole mission here at How the Frack We Got Here is to inform, to get you guys involved about what's going on, not only with your federal government, but also with your city and state, to basically be informed and to act, because we can no longer sit there and say we're not doing anything when we have the ability to do so. But hopefully, this definitely reaches out. And like I said, like and tell people about it. Word of mouth is the greatest weapon we have against the algorithm. And trust me, the algorithm was nice to Black folks during Black History Month, but now it's gone back to its usual evil hating ways. Yes, congrats to you guys on come up. Thank you so very much, Osman. Really appreciate that. And again, guys, we will definitely be back here next Wednesday. Again, let me know what you thought about everything that we discussed. Again, it's a free environment as far as us discussing things. We're not trying to put anybody down, unless you're a Trump supporter wanting to troll. It's happened once or twice, but I shouldn't be surprised about that. But again, we're trying to inform and share ideas and to inspire people. That's all we're trying to do. And hopefully so, because again, Trump is about to basically get the Republican nomination. So Biden's about to get Democratic. So we are going to see a rematch. We'll see how it goes. But the last thing I say about How the Frack We Got Here, guys, is all about staying informed. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it. We do better once we're informed. We're progressive. We move forward. We try to change our ways, right our wrongs by doing decisions now that we should have done back then. Like electing our first Black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first Black woman as a cybersecurity advisor of the United States. All great things. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat it. That's why we keep asking ourselves, why does everything go about our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the Frack We Got Here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Again, take care of yourselves and each other. We'll all get through this. Peace.